As you could possibly imagine, the research that we've done is wide and varied. And those of you that have already seen this white paper, we do have to admit, is a bit of a monster, which is why we did an executive briefing and why we're doing this session now. But the reason why it's so rich is that we've added a lot of current examples of best practices emerging, not so good practices emerging, actions and next steps that can be taken. So our aim for today is to take you through some of the headlines and go from there. So I'm Jeremy Blain, one of the co-authors of the research. I've done quite a bit of research over the years and all really focused around transformation, business transformation, digital transformation, with my good mate Robin, who's on the call here now, the workforce transformation, and now this one together with Paul, who's going to introduce himself now as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Jeremy. And it's actually been a real pleasure doing this project with Jeremy. One, because he's a good guy for one, and number two, what we've found from it has been, the information, the insights that we've got from doing this has been really fantastic, and I think of real value. So yeah, my name is Paul Marks, and I'm originally from the UK, but I live in Bangkok, Thailand. And I do a lot of leadership and team development programs as well. And that's kind of how Jeremy and I met some years ago. 10 years ago, I think, Jeremy, it may have been. Yeah.
It was when I was with Sagos Asia Pacific. Yeah.
Yeah. Did I have hair then? Or
well, one or two strands at the most, Paul. Yes, yeah.
Anyway.
Right then, thank you. So on that note, let me take over and move on from this. So we'll make a start. So at the heart of this research were really three key things that we were looking at and that emerged as the imperatives, not just for 2021 post-pandemic, but for the decade ahead. And if there is one big headline that comes out of this, it is about the rise and need for more human-centered leadership. So those traits we go into in a little bit more detail, but also from a business perspective, we can't forget this, because the leadership challenges of today are balancing for some business survival with the need to engage, mobilize their people, their customers, the communities around them, while transforming their business. And we've had a great experiment in some organizations this year in moving to remote working, which has been the biggest accelerator of digital transformation, as Robin would also tell you, since the launch of the iPhone. And also the third point around community, which is about raising our eyes above and beyond our company within the communities that we serve, but also the planet as a whole and society as a whole. And there are some very interesting things that have come out of it from that perspective. This was really at the heart of our research. And when Paul and I came into this sort of 6 months after the lockdown, circuit breakers, whatever you want to call them, we could see a sea change happening in the organizations we were dealing with, what we were being told within our network, what we were seeing being posted more regularly on LinkedIn, and we wanted to know more. So we invested in a very robust piece of research to bring out these leadership traits and skills, which will inform the way forward for many business leaders today. It was almost 2,000 surveyed across 27 countries, and you can see those all on the right-hand side. And what we did, though, was that we didn't only go to leaders in the C-suite, we brought in the feedback from the employees, because it was always useful to get that other perspective. So the leaders may think one thing, but as was proved quite quickly and quite early in this research, the reality or the perception of the situation might be quite different at employee view. So bringing those two things together have really, really helped. Now, we're not going to go into any regional splits today. We're just going to give you the headlines. But for those of you interested, we will do that. And I think for those of you that actually made it to this webinar, we will also give you a copy of the white paper for free, because we're actually charging for it this time. But for you, we will give it for free. So for the surveys themselves, we supplemented this with six interviewees that represented businesses across 3 continents. These are our interviewees. So it's quite a wide and varied bunch that we had at varying leadership levels within the organization. But it was really important to contextualize some of the research that came forward, but also hear what leaders at the front lines are saying today, and put, and also really the more enlightened leaders from around this. So I'm going to pass over to Paul now, who is going to take you through the headlines. You have to unmute yourself though, Paul, first.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had trouble. I've lost the ability to share my screen, Jeremy.
No, you could just use these slides, Paul.
I'll just use these slides. Okay, that's great. So first of all, yeah. So thanks, Jeremy, for giving us an overview there. And as I said, it was a really interesting endeavor that we've taken on. And what I'd like to do is give you now a bit of a broad overview of some of the key findings that we found during our research. And I guess the first place really for us to start is to think about and to consider some of the key challenges that we perceive, or we're seeing happening, right? Not perceive, we're actually going through these challenges right now, and also looking at these challenges into the future. So on the next slide here, let's see. Can you click that one for me, Jeremy? I can't seem to. Oh, here we go. Is it? Sorry. Oh, there it is. Wonderful. See? So yeah, what I'm going to do is just give you a quick overview of the top leadership concerns. So these were really the key issues that when we discussed, when we interviewed and when we surveyed the leaders, they came back to us and said, this is what's really on our mind. And of course, the first one is evident, and probably one of the biggest catalysts of change, which essentially is the pace of change that's happening at the moment. And there's no sign that it will slow down. And of course, with that type of change, you're also going to get a lot of uncertainty as well. And so for leaders, trying to create a vision to move forward, trying to create a strategy to move forward is really challenging, because we just don't know what's ahead of us. There are also a lot of concerns around upskilling. So upskilling the leaders themselves, like what kind of skills do they need to be able to not only survive, but actually thrive in the decade ahead? And also, what kind of skills does the workforce need in order to be successful moving forward? Now, again, I think one of the big highlights for me here is, looking at how we can also be agile enough to move with the competition and with the change and digitalization and everything that's happening. But at the same time, how do we do that and still maintain that human touch? Because it really doesn't matter how fast the business is moving and how much things are moving, towards being digitalized, or, the integration of artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, we are still leading people. And it's really important for us to remember that, and to make sure that's part of our leadership plan moving forward. So anyway, these are some of the key points that Jeremy and I found in terms of major concerns or key concerns for leaders. Now, moving on to that, moving on to the next slide here, there are essentially two key factors or supporting factors that we also found that came from the research as well, especially when looking at trying to resolve or tackle these key issues that we've discussed here. So the first, I guess, key factor really is looking at how we can really move into that age of empowerment. And what I mean by that is, how can we really empower our teams, our people, so that they can grow and make decisions, and at the same time flatten the business structure, flatten the organization. And of course, the reason that we need to be able to do this is because when we have a very strong hierarchy within an organization, decision making, getting things done is extremely slow. And if we're going to be competitive moving forward, it's essential that we're able to move fast, we'll be able to move in an agile way and make quick decisions. So that's one of the key factors there. The second one, of course, and again, I think this is a big struggle for a lot of leaders and organizations that I'm working with now, is looking at new business models for the modern workplace. So, whether that be, transformation into digitalization, or whether it's a shift in the way that the workforce operates, this new business model is something that a lot of organizations appreciate has to happen, but it's a case of how does it happen? And I think that's a big concern. Anything to add there, Jeremy? Have I left anything out?
I would reinforce that point around the workforce shift, is saying that the many organizations who have discovered new business models this year, including the more informal, now becoming formalized trend of independent workers becoming a much more integrated part of the business, and that within the next 2 years, 50% of any business will be made up of independent stroke gig workers and permanent workers. It calls for a brand new, not just business manifesto, but HR framework behind it. And that is what, they haven't grappled with at the moment, because they've been preoccupied, obviously, with the digital transformation that you talked about, the business needs short term and medium term. Remember, we only just came off also a 10-year financial crisis. Then the pandemic hit.
Yeah, this is so true. But Jeremy, there's one big concern I think we should share with our viewers and listeners today. And that is some research that came out about preparedness or readiness to move forward into the future. So what we could see is that when we actually surveyed the leaders, there was quite a good response in terms of feeling ready. Leaders actually thought that, yeah, we're good. We are ready to tackle these challenges ahead. In fact, out of the leaders that we actually surveyed and interviewed, 67% believed that they are prepared. They are prepared to tackle the challenges ahead and navigate themselves and their organizations forward. But what was really concerning, and this is a big concern, is that 39% of the employees, so the people working for those leaders, think that only thought that the leadership was ready. So that's a huge chunk. We've got what, 61%? Is it? Am I right? Is my maths? No, 50. Yes, that's right. That actually believe that the leaders are not ready, that they are, they're not confident that their leadership can take them forward into the future. And of course, this actually causes a lot of concerns at many levels, because if our teams, our employees, our workforce doesn't believe in us or doesn't have confidence in leadership, where's that going to take us? And also the fact that there is actually this misconception or misunderstanding and misperception in capability moving forward. And what we saw, though, I guess from my part of the world over here is that, if we dig down into that information and the findings that we found, that generally speaking, leaders across Asia Pacific seem to be better prepared for the challenges ahead, and that from their perspective and from their employees' perspective as well. And that really put them ahead of the US and Europe. And there is one country that's really sort of, I would say, doing badly. And I know this is a real hot topic for Jeremy, because I know how passionate he is about this, but of course the Brexit, the impact, which is still ongoing and will be ongoing for many moons and months and years ahead, I'm sure. I think probably knocked the confidence of employees in the UK as well. Yeah. All right, Jeremy, anything you want to say on that, especially around the Brexit stuff, or do you want to leave that out for today?
Oh, I don't think I better go there, Paul.
We'll need another hour.
I'm very passionate about Brexit, but not the way that it's happening. I was definitely a Remainer. But one thing that I would say, having been based in Asia for 7 years and moving back at the beginning of 2019, I was shocked moving back into the UK about how little traditional leadership had moved forward. It was only when I kind of hit the ground and went around some of the startup incubators and some of the founders and small businesses that I saw real hope for the future. So there's a real kind of tale of two stories here in the UK. So what we'll do now is go down into just headlines in the three key areas of the research that I talked about before that have come out as the most important for focus for leaders moving forward over the next 10 years. And the first one is around human-centered leaderships. And what that means when we talk about human-centered leadership, we started looking at what are the most important traits that are valued by employees that leaders can demonstrate that they also feel are important to mobilize, engage people, be they stakeholders, customers, employees, independent workers, and so on. So instead of going into the actual data itself, we pulled out for this session the common positive factors and negative factors. So the positive factors are here, and the big headline from this is the first bullet point that you see there on the bottom left, which is empathy-driven leadership was by far and away the #1 need from an employee perspective. And while it was in the top 10 for leaders, it was about sort of #6. It was part of emotional intelligence that they recognized they needed to get better at as well. But empathy as a standalone trait stroke skill is becoming more and more important. And that's no accident based on the year that we have had. There have been some great examples of organizations getting it right. These two particularly, and I'll use Agoda from Southeast Asia as an example, as Peter Allen was one of the leaders within the business, was one of our interviewees as well. Even when the organizations like both of these had to downsize or let some people go, they were marked and credited for the way that they led that, dealt with it, demonstrated empathy, looked after the people that were leaving, but also included the people that were staying in that to make sure that they understood that they were doing the right things by their colleagues. Nobody was kind of left out from this. And I'm going to show you a stark example of one organization getting it quite wrong in a second, but empathy really was the differentiator of those organizations that were able to accelerate through their remote working, new structuring, and back into starting to do business quicker versus some of the others that were there. And associated with that was some of the other things that you see down here. One being greater levels of communication, which came up time and time again, but also the other one, which became more important, was about walking the walk. We had so many employees said, I wish that our leaders would come off, their ivory tower, take their eyes off the sky and start putting their feet on the ground a little bit. We're not seeing the actions with the words that we want to see. And it's really important right now. And one of the other things that came out of it here is that there is a perceived narrowing of the capability gap between some leaders and their employees when you consider some of the things that Paul talked about, like digital, new ways of working, remote, small group collaboration, all of these kind of new ways of working and unstructured working outside of the norms of the sort of corporate politic, if you like, is that there is a perception that actually employees are very comfortable in doing that, and they're seeing the gap narrowing between what they can do. And this explains one of the main points around empowerment that came out of it, the need for greater empowerment, but also the benefits of greater empowerment, because people can and have the will to do it. On the flip side, when we consider some of the common negative factors, it won't surprise you to hear that a lack of communication has not been appreciated. And even more so this year. This isn't something that's peculiar to 2020, but this has been there and growing over the last few years, particularly over the transformational period, global financial crisis, parts of Asia Pacific during the China-US or ongoing China-US trade wars, when that forces a shorter term view at leadership level around what are our numbers this month, this week, today, versus actually where we're going to be into the future, that balance. So that kind of overwhelming of pressure, that inability to manage the pressures of their the pandemic, the move to different styles of working, when that hit, is what some of the employees in those organizations that weren't getting it right, first of all, have started seeing the gaps and the cracks at leadership level. And I love that quote at the bottom that talks about that. There is one company in the UK, so those of you that are not in the UK, I would urge you to go and just Google Britannia Hotels issue COVID, something like that, and you'll be horrified by what you will see. They have a reputation anyway for quite aggressive management and leadership, and very much about profits over anything else, which is, you know, from a leadership perspective, is exactly what we need to be drive, but not always at the expense of everything else, which we'll come to. The letter on the left, which you're not going to be able to see, was a letter sent on the 19th of March this year to employees at one of their hotels in Scotland, on the 19th, telling them that on the 19th, they now needed to get out of their accommodation. Their jobs no longer existed. Thank you very much for your service. Many of these were from across Europe. They had nowhere to go. The company didn't help them. And it was a huge PR disaster. It impacted their employer branding. And it what they found once they started to normalize, they couldn't then start to get the staff that they needed. Fast forward a month or so, another part of their business that owns holiday camps, called Pontins in the UK, had huge issues when they started opening again, sort of around June, after the first lockdown was eased, because they couldn't find cleaners, and the state of sanitation was dreadful. So they had a double whammy of negative hits, and it has started hitting their perception, their branding. So the branding is really important, because from an employee perspective, people will start to be more discerning about the companies and the leaders that they join, as well as stay with. So those are some of the stories coming out of there. And just as a summary of this, a quote that we got from here is very apt at this point for you to read through, as I go through some of the key actions which were very clear to come out of here. Human touch is important, which is also about the empathy of leadership styles, built on a foundation of what does your evolved culture now need to look like in this next normal that we're moving towards. It's not about going back to normal, it's about embracing the possibilities of moving forward. And you can only do that and engage people when you've got the right culture and you've got the trust. Paul.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, and again, I can't emphasize, I think, and I guess we'll get more into this, into the community, when we look at the community-based or community-centered leadership, about the importance of considering people at the center of your business, and also the community as well. And how, I think, in a world today where everyone is so connected and information is so readily available, we really have to be very mindful of how we operate and how we treat those people that work for us and the communities around us. Now, what I'm going to do now is just go through the second key focus area of business-centered leadership. And I'm going to be sharing, again, some insights with you, some key headings from what we found from our research. There is some good news, I guess. You know, we saw a few gaps earlier on in perceptions and things like that. But one of the things that we found that there was an agreement between the leaders and employees was that essentially there are three business leadership skills in common that we really need to develop. We really need to focus on moving forward. And of course, without saying, I guess, you know, digital is there at the top of the list. How do we develop those skills? How do we upskill our teams so that they have the capacity to work in a digital world? And I guess the second key focus area is on really being more customer centric, and not just about thinking about like offering an experience, but really looking at, you know, the entire customer journey, and looking at where we can truly add value at each step of the customer journey as well. This is really key, because I think that people or customers, clients today expect more. They feel like they deserve more. And they're not just looking for products and services, they're looking for value. And that's a real key point. And of course, the last one is really, I think, connected to, again, digital and AI. and technology moving forward, we need to look at how we can be better at making data-driven decisions as we move forward. And, you know, when we have those decisions, or we have that data, when we have that data available, how we can be more agile and more innovative as we move forward. So, I mean, these are real key areas, I think, that, like we said, leaders and employees see as a key focus for us moving forward. All right, now, unfortunately, there is a gap that we also have to discuss here. And this one for me, I don't know about you, Jeremy, but this one was also an interesting one. So one of the big gaps that we saw between leaders in the business and employees is really based around the implementation of strategy. So we see a lot of leaders coming out with great visions about, you know, how they're going to move forward into the future, and then the strategy comes. But we found from our research that a lot of employees really didn't feel like that leaders were really following through. They talk the talk, but what we really needed was for them to walk the walk. So it's really about execution and implementation of strategy. And again, there are a number of reasons why that could be a challenge at this time. A lot of it is because I think that a lot of the strategies or transformations that are happening are unclear to leaders themselves on how to move forward. And so, you know, for, I guess, a good piece of advice here for leaders in the room listening, and anyone that looks at our research, is really think about that hard. You know, are you doing what you're saying? Are you able to walk the walk? Do you have a clear strategy in place? And are you taking those steps to make that happen? So that was the big gap here, what we found in the business-centered leadership component of our research. Now, there are just a few other thoughts, I guess, key thoughts that we can share with you here as well on this component of it. As I said, really, moving forward, defining a strategy and actually moving with that strategy rather than just talking about it is key. And when we talk about moving, how do we mobilize and engage the organization as well to move with that strategy? Now, the other key area, I think, as we just discussed, is looking at how we can accelerate and rapidly adopt digitalization in our organizations and embrace that data-driven decision-making processes. I think still a lot of organizations are still stuck with more traditional ways of making decisions, but we can see with the rapid speed of change, the competition, customer expectations, all these extra demands, we need to be doing a better job at making better and quicker decisions. And again, looking back, if we look at it from a customer perspective, we need to be looking at how we can really engage our workforce to make sure that we're focusing on the total customer journey and ensuring that we not only satisfy, but we delight customers along the experience. So I think these are some of the key points I think that we got from this, Jeremy.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull in some research that I've done with Robin, who's also on this call. Strategy implementation has been an issue for some time now. Robin's own research proves that 63% of the time normal strategy fails. According to IBM and Oracle, digital transformation strategy execution is failing, or was failing, over 8 out of 10 times for organizations. It's only this year, when we've now been forced over that precipice for some of those leaders that remain, that the real issues are coming up. And the real issues are about that execution plan and the understanding at the heart of digital success is the human touch and the human component, which drives that all. So that really fundamentally then drives the rest of the business, and going beyond high satisfaction for customers and for us as an organization to be more obsessed with the customer and the customer journey, to really then focus on what matters rather than focused on internally on, have we got the business geared up right? Is our culture right? Are the people on board with us? We can be too internally focused from a business perspective and miss what's going on outside. And that's coming to sharp focus, of course, this year. So the final third of this research is around the community-centered piece. And when I talk about community, I'm talking about the community internally within our organizations, the communities within which we serve, and society as a whole, which is becoming a much more important part for a new breed of leaders emerging that have become very clear from this research here. So the common factors around this are leaders, in summary, being forces for good, as you see down there. What that means is the balance between purpose and profitability. That really is at the heart of this, coming out of the research. We must take our organizations forward in a new way because we have bigger issues at a global level. We have climate change, we have huge diversity and equity issues to deal with. And it is the duty of organizations that employ thousands of people, as well as leaders who are starting up business, to start thinking about this and how they contribute to it as well. There is a certification called the B Corp certification, which is around certifying businesses in doing ethically minded business. So it looks at any business decision, how it impacts your people, the community, your customers, your suppliers, etc., and how you do all of those things. It goes way beyond what many of you like me will probably remember was the old ISO process quality standard. And as soon as we got that tick in the box, it was great. Off we go. Let's go make some money. But this is a much more purpose-driven element to it, to balance the needs of the business, but also balance the needs of the people and the community within there. So as well as making sure that your people are along with you, is what are we doing outside our businesses? And I would say this is a message not just for the bigger businesses that have got big budget pots that they can do this. Paul and I, both with our small businesses, we contribute to the local communities within which we serve. We donate to certain charities. We get actively involved in some of the community projects that are underway, because it's part of how we built our business, and it's part of being an evolved leader. And we can all learn from that. I've come from a corporate leadership point of view, but I'm always learning, and I'm learning from a lot of the new millennial leaders that I'm partnering with at the moment, who are bringing in this perception, you know, front and center, which I really admire. And one of the things that came out, which was on one level reinforced the point, but was very gratifying to see in some ways, is that employees are more discerning now. They are making the choice to stay with or go and join an organization who have credentials beyond an attractive brand and a successful business model from a revenue profit perspective. Those organizations that are doing things differently and are more community minded and focused are important, and higher on their list now than the traditional things as we see down here, like the skills, remuneration, and so on. While they're still on the list, this is becoming more important, and I think that's a very important point to do so. I talked about D, E, and I, and this was one of the biggest skill gaps that came out of the survey that emerged as a very important one for leaders and potentially traditional leaders to get hold of now. So there's a lot of talk about this, but not much action. There's been slow development about moving forward about what this actually means and what positive action means around this. And that again has come into stark contrast this year with things like Black Lives Matter, lots of cultural appropriation around the world, and what that means to certain cultures and countries and so on, and how we actually have to look at this through brand new lenses, being informed of what can go right and what can go wrong if we don't do, from what we've seen through this year. Meaningful action is absolutely key. And I would say what came out of it also was the challenge, not just at the leaders within the business, but at executive board level, there was a lack of experience and understanding of what was needed in the modern workplace, not just from the usual things like digital, like workforce transformation, but the non-exec directors and executive boards that hadn't been managing recently. For this element is not something that they were expert enough at to drive governance behind, but also to advise behind. So this is a call to action at that level beyond executive leadership also. So from a community perspective, Paul Hargreaves, a small company in the UK, food service wholesale, That quote for me says it all. It is about the planet as much as the people, and your customers and your people will recognize that over the next 10 years more and more, and start making choices behind it. We are already, even in my business, I'm seeing when I'm looking for new organizations, or I may hit going to agreement stage with one of the customers for a new project, I am increasingly being asked about my credentials in this area. What is your not just what is your sustainability policy, what is your purpose, what is your community commitment? Not everywhere. It's it's fewer rather than more, but it will become more. So the actions around here are some of the obvious ones here as well. Is how do we glue together the internal with the external communities, so we're all going in the right direction? We can include and empower our people within this. And again, it links back to what we said from a human touch perspective. Having the right values and behaviors that drive the new evolved culture is going to drive that, because that will drive the climate for how we operate, how we empower, how we work with our customers, and how we treat everybody with tolerance, and how we welcome belonging, whether you're part of the company as an employee, as an independent worker, as a stakeholder, or as a customer. Paul.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm back on again. Yeah, thank you. Now, looking at the three core areas here, when Jeremy and I, went on this adventure, I would almost call it, we were looking at, obviously trying to identify, I guess, what were the key issues, first of all, as we mentioned at the beginning, to look at some of the gaps, and then, of course, to identify what is it, or what are the traits essentially that leaders need today and into the future in order to be able to navigate the challenges, but also to be successful. And so all of this research and everything that we put together really has to lead to one thing, and that's action. We can have all of this information, this data, but what are leaders going to do with it? That's the question that we asked. And of course, one of the things that we found was that there are so many components to this. There are so many attributes, so many elements that need to be taken into consideration. And Jeremy and I thought to ourselves, well, how do we make this something that people can actually take action on? What can we do with this? So what we tried to do was to create a model, or I guess a model that would show essentially the DNA, if you like, of leaders, enlightened leaders for the future. And so what we did, we created a model based around a nucleus here. And this nucleus really is, I guess, the cell, or the body of all the key elements of what it means to be a leader, a successful leader now and moving into the future. And so what we would do, well, what I'd like to do is essentially invite you, when you get into the research and go through this, to have a look at this model, and look at the key elements in this model, and look at yourself as a leader, and decide and think about, what it is that you need to develop. Which parts of this do you think you need to work on? And then, of course, there's your teams as well, and the people around you within your organization. So this model, we hope, sort of encompasses really, I guess, all the key takeaways from the research that we've done over the last few months. And again, like I said, take your time, go through this once you've had a look and you've downloaded the paper. Now, as well, moving forward from that, I mean, what next? That's really the question that a lot of people are asking us as well. So they say, okay, guys, you've put this together, you've come up with a model, really good information, it's insightful, but how do we move forward? Well, the first thing, as I said, is you've got to download the paper, go through it, and see how it's relevant to what you're doing as a leader and what's happening within your organization as well. The other thing as well is that there's also an assessment form that you can also access, obviously to assess your skill levels here as well, and the traits, which we also offer, which you can get hold of. And of course, Jeremy and I, as we've gone through this, we've learned a lot. And we are now offering a series of different solutions, workshops, keynotes, for leaders and teams globally. So we can do these sessions virtually, or we can actually come to your organization as well. And of course, you know, at the end of all this, if there's anything that you would like to know more about, or if you'd like to pick Jeremy's brain or my brain a little bit more on any of these topics, please always feel free to contact us directly, because I think this is something that we're both very passionate about. We put a lot of time, a lot of energy into it, and we've learned a lot from the process. So for us to share our insights with you is certainly a pleasure. Yeah.
And what I'd add to this is that as we went through this, it started to challenge our own views of leadership. You know, for those of us on this call who are in learning and development, who are coaches, it's easy sometimes to get caught into the traditional ways of looking at leadership and what leadership means and the skill sets that are most appropriate to leadership. Now, a lot of those skill sets are still appropriate, but there is a pivot happening here. And the more non-traditional areas that we mention now need to be front and center. This is purpose-driven, balance of purpose and profit, being more society-minded and community-minded, but also at the heart of our enlightened leader model, as you saw, the nucleus of that is the human-centered leadership. This is where everything grows from. So the new breed of leader with greater empathy and greater way forward has the opportunity to engage their people in a way that they possibly haven't done before, but also talk to the market and talk to their customers in a way that they haven't done before, and start to actively contribute beyond the bottom line, which is what our call to action really is. And that is challenging ourselves. It certainly challenged Paul and I. And when we started to look at what a new model could be, and started to build that model and all the component parts around it, it started to challenge ourselves, what we might be talking even now to organizations about. And I know somebody else on the call, Kevin Cottam, who is a Mr. Global Nomad himself, and the nomadic leadership guru, will know exactly what I mean. The time of now is for a brand new sort of approach to leadership. We need to embrace the nomadic mindset, as Kevin would call it, as much as understanding, you know, where we have been and where we've come from, move away from our 20th century thinking and absolutely into the 2020s and beyond, and where that is. So thank you very much for all of you who have joined us for now. Paul and I will be on for another 10 minutes or so for any questions. I'm just going to check the chat now.
Yeah, we have a question in here right now,
okay.
Jeremy. I'm just reading it now. It just popped up here, and it's really about so
made everybody into a robot. Yeah. So the question from Zorab, would you like to unmute your microphone and just maybe articulate that to everybody?
Easier.
You did a very good job of writing a lot of stuff there, so please articulate it.
Okay, so first and foremost, thank you, Paul, thank you, Jeremy, for putting together, and definitely a model that I would go and read more once the white paper is in my email box. Now, I came from a corporate sector, and Robin and Jeremy would know. I spent many years, and what I realized is that companies have begun to develop this new skill set of making humans into robots. Actually, we don't even have to come up with a new robot or AI, because everybody goes into the work. You start your computer, you start data entry, deliver, and that's off you go. And that has been the norm that we see. And when people talk about human-centric, which is very important, people-centric, the sad part is that the management always see customer first. So it's always customer-centric at the expense of people-centric. So that question is, having seen what you've listed down just in terms of the behavior, the skill set still leads towards very much more digital, about customer centricity. It's still about agile. My question is, how do you even start this first wake-up call for the leaders that, hey, you need to do something. Those skills are important. The community action, the 3 Ps, the people, planet, and profit is important. But hang on, how do we even get the leaders to open up their minds that this is actually real. Yeah, that would be the dilemma that I do face even when talking to others.
Sorry, I'd like to. Is that right, Jeremy? I have some thoughts around this myself, because I do see this a lot. I mean, the first thing is that the leaders or the organizations thinking about the bottom line, right? And like you said, they're thinking about the customer. But the truth of the matter is that one of the biggest challenges that organizations have had for years, and I don't think it's getting much better in some places, is engagement. You see, if you're not treating people as human beings, if you're not respecting them as individuals and understanding their feelings, emotions, and needs, and all these things, people are not working at their top. They're not working at their best. And you know, there's enough research, there's enough out there to show us that when we have a happy community where people feel they're in an environment where they're respected, they feel safe, you get innovation, you get new ideas, you get synergy, you get collaboration, you get, you know, better communication across the organization. So for me, I think when we need to get that through to leaders that, we're all on the same page. We know we have to make a profit. We know there's a bottom line, but the best way to get there, to achieve that, is through the people. And we really have to take that into consideration. And I think that's what that research, what we found is that empathy is so important. It's calling out. People are saying, you know, we're tired maybe of being treated like robots. Try to understand our situation so that we can do a better job for you. That's my take. Jeremy.
Fundamentally, it's about mindset, actually. It's moving away from thinking that empathy and emotional intelligence is a soft skill and understanding that it's a power skill for tomorrow. And that is emerging from the very best of breed leaders at the moment. We're seeing lots of examples from it around the world. Those are the headlines that we're seeing. You know, finally, we're seeing positive headlines, leaders who are making a difference for good in their organizations through this pandemic, who are willing to change, who are willing to adapt and hold their hand up and say, you know what, I don't know everything. And we do need to curate leadership and ideas and innovation throughout our organization. But it's also a business need, because at the very heart of business success is your people. Your people are taking your products and services to market. They're doing the internal work around processes, systems, and how we make it more efficient. They're doing the marketing, they're doing the sales, you know, all of these kind of things that they're doing. But the talent pool is becoming, for permanent employees, is reducing, because many who are disillusioned, like you, Zorab, and like I, in the corporate organizations that we were with, that we weren't changing. We were talking a good game, but we were never going to be a future looking business. We were always going to be a traditional business. Gen X is the biggest generation at the moment making the move to independent work in the last 2 years, joining the majority of millennials that are there. Yes, hold your hand up. We're part of. Yes, I hear you, brother. We're part of that group, because we sort of feel, hey, you know, first of all, it's like I've been saying it. I've been having this conversation and nobody's listening. But I'm also saying that I don't want to lead this. I don't want to take over this mess and transform it as it is. So what I'll do is I'll leave, and you can hire me as a consultant to come in occasionally and help you. but I'm not going to be the answer to your problems. So the generation of leaders in even traditional businesses now, small, medium, large, or even at founder level, have to have this at the heart of it, because they have to engage themselves at a human level to get the buy-in again, to retain their talent, attract talent, and remembering that talent is not just permanent talent. It's the independent workforce. And it's those organizations that treat the independent workforce like they're part of the team, you know, will generate loyalty there as well. And many aren't doing it, you know. So I think there's a number of things here to think about, but that would be my take, Zorab. I hope that helps.
Yeah, actually, because, you know, all these are to me, it's like the second step. It is really to how to wake up the leaders, because as you know, a lot of leaders are not humble. They're not going to be bothered with all this that is coming. So how do we even get them to realize that you have to change? I think that's the first the first hurdle
Yeah.
Once we clear that, we should be able to come in and say, look, this is what the research is saying, and this is what you can do. But until the realization comes, I don't know.
Yeah, I think actually we have a positive message from that this year in some ways. We have a blueprint because people have been forced over this big gap that has been there in terms of change or digitalization, whatever you want to call it, to go to remote working. So leaders and people have been used to much more experimentation this year than they have been possibly in even the last 10 years, last 20 years. So I think that's a really good way to look at it and say, look, let's embrace this journey that we're on and keep looking at the possibilities rather than saying things like, I can't wait to get back to normal, because that old normal is not fit for purpose anymore. We're finding our way forward. So thanks for that. And in fact, there's a related question I see from Robin. Robin, maybe would you mind unmuting and just going into that question a little bit deeper for us,
sure,
please,
you want me to
while
unmute?
I think about it.
So yeah, it's building on Paul. Jeremy, thank you for sharing. Obviously, you spent a lot of hard work and research, so congrats to you both. And finally getting the white paper published is, I can imagine the sense of relief you both have. So well done on that. Picking up from what you're saying, the conversation has gone a little bit towards the gig economy, bringing it back to employees within the organization. One of the challenge I see clients, and for those on the call, as Jeremy mentioned kindly earlier, I specialize in digital and strategy implementation, which Paul touched on during his presentation. And one of the challenges I see, I'd like to get your view on, is the employee who's being reskilled, who's got that challenge that either be, employable for tomorrow or you're out of a job, and they're sitting in front of the leader. How does the leader work with that employee to convince them, to inspire them, to give them that drive to really go back to school, to learn, Python or some form of coding, or to learn digital visualization or analytics, this whole new world? What have you gained from the research in that field? I'd love to know. Thank you.
Yeah, go on, Jeremy.
Sorry, Paul. No, carry on, Paul, because I was going to say to Robin that after these answers, I'm going to come for you. I'm going to come back to you for an answer as well. Okay, so go on, Paul.
No problem. This is such a valid point, because we're telling people to upskill, we're putting pressure on them, and then at the same time we're saying stay human. And I think that the key here, and I think this is something with society today, is that people don't listen. They hear a lot, but they don't truly listen. They don't listen to understand. And I think that...
Can you say that again?
Sorry.
Very funny, Robin.
Very good, Robin. I was thinking to myself, is that a delay on here or what? I was worried about my internet connection. But yeah, I think the key is listening to understand, and people are not always looking for solutions. They're not always looking to leaders to give them answers. They just want to be understood. And when we're asking people to upskill or to develop, I think a lot of this from the research is really based around coaching, being a good leader as a coach or manager as a coach, to actually first of all understand where people want to be going in line with the business, but also spending the time to really listen to understand their needs, concerns, and challenges, and helping them to find the solutions for themselves moving forward. So for me, it's around coaching. Yeah.
Well, can I do a quick follow-up?
Please.
If you had your lift or your one tweet to a senior leader, what would be your advice to how can he demonstrate that coaching to the, how can he demonstrate through that through a behavior or action? What would be the one suggestion you make?
I think the one suggestion is talk to your people. Go down on the floor, connect with people, not just the business. Connect with people, not just the business. That would be my key. Yeah.
Okay.
If I can add to this, from the research specifically, it was a more collaborative leadership style versus a command and control leadership style. Yeah. So it really very much is the traditional versus the new style of leadership. And a lot of leaders need to go to the school of unlearning rather than actually learning to do something new first. They need to get out of their bad habits to look at what the new operating system for leadership looks like for 2021 and beyond, and start to adopt that. And this is where we see that flattening of that capability gap, is that those leaders who have the courage to say, you know, I don't know everything, and can, as Paul said, to connect and actually talk with, not talk at their people. So that we have a bit of reverse mentoring going on, as well as the investment that is there from an enlightened leader to say, I'm going to invest in your reskilling. I'm going to help you through this. And it's going to be great for you, not just in our company, but for you as a person in the modern workplace that we have today. It is all about ushering in this age of empowerment. And this leads me beautifully to the fact that I'm writing a book about this, or I've written a book about this as well, which is leadership at all levels is something that we've talked about for years, but no how-to manual exists. There are leadership books or whatever until now. And it's going, thank you, Zohrab. It's going to launch in Q1 next year. But I felt that this is fundamental to your question, is there is an organization and leadership challenge within that, into that age of empowerment, as well as the leaders at all levels. And bringing all of that together will help. But Robin, maybe you have a view on this as well, because I know that you've worked very closely with DBS Bank, with a leader who is enlightened and who has successfully transformed their business to the, you know, best digital bank in the world. 3 years.
Yeah, thank you for that, lead. I was just back at DBS yesterday. Yeah, I mean, for the one thing I'm seeing is the difficulty leaders are having swallowing humble pie, and walking into the room, seeing the problem and saying, right, this is how we solve it. Now, you know, or going into a meeting to check that what they said to be done had to be done. Now they go into meetings to find out what's going on, because we've got so many hackathons and design thinking and other events going on in the organization. And secondly, you know, there's a whole new skill set, as we all know, around digital literature that everybody is learning. We're all at starting from zero, and they have to humble themselves. And you touched on it well in your presentation. They don't do it well. And that's what, so thank you for asking. That's what I'm seeing from my clients in this part of the world. You know, the challenge of just admitting I don't know.
Yeah.
And having to say that. And your reverse mentoring is spot on. That's one of the best practices that have emerged from DBS, where the leader gets taught by a junior employee, so they don't lose face in a meeting. They don't lose respect. They can carry on. So yeah, reverse mentoring works very well in today's world.
Paul, sorry, did I see that you had something to add there?
No, actually, no, nothing. It was great. You know, when you were talking about, it was just on my mind when you said reverse mentoring. It was just like, yeah. and it really does link to, like we said, that belief that those leaders actually think they're doing a great job. And well, the research says otherwise, right? In terms of planning and being ready for the future. Yeah.
You know, it's fundamentally why the eventual name for this research and model is called the Enlightened Leader. It does need that moment to happen, that enlightened moment, and the new leaders to hold their hands up and say that. And that is the difference between old school and new school. But it is rapidly changing, is the positive from this year, I think. Now, we're bang on time right now, but if there are any more questions, Paul and I will stay on for another 5 minutes, but I'm sure many of you who were scheduled for the hour will need to leave now. Please do. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll send a recording, but we're here to help for any other questions that remain. Thank you.